Hello and welcome to Government with Dr. Turner. Today we're going to explain the different paths to equality taken by other racial and ethnic groups, specifically Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans. Congressional policy toward Native Americans has historically varied between assimilating Native Americans into a European-based culture and encouraging independence and self-government. The American government has deprived Native Americans of their ancestral lands, thus destroying their culture, while providing them with very little aid in order to make them independent. American Indians were classified as U.S. citizens in 1924, but were not eligible to vote in every state until 1962. Native Americans live in a state of tension as citizens of tribes and citizens of the U.S., with rights from each. Indian tribes in the United States enjoy the legal status of autonomous nations with their own rules of governance. Native Americans were able to take this status as semi-sovereign nations and turn it into new financial prosperity through casino gambling on reservations. At the same time, casinos have begun to erase traditional American Indian culture. Native Americans face an especially difficult task in winning battles in American politics because the courts have not been inclined to protect them. Native American issues are complex and vary by region, tribe, community, and culture. The needs of Native American voters are rarely addressed by national candidates. Hispanic Americans currently make up the largest ethnic or racial minority group in the United States. The U.S. Hispanic population numbers more than 61 million. About 80% are U.S. citizens. The struggle for Hispanic American civil rights began in the early 20th century. Waves of violence aimed at Mexicans and Mexican Americans swept through the Southwest. Mexican Americans were denied the right to vote and were barred from attending Anglo-American schools. In 1929, Latino civil rights activists formed the League of United Latin American Citizens to protest against discrimination and to fight for greater rights for Latinos. During World War II, Mexicans were invited to immigrate to the U.S. as farm workers who would then be eligible to enlist in the armed services. However, mass deportations of Mexican immigrants took place in the 1950s. The 1960s saw the growth of the Chicano movement and the introduction of bilingual instruction for school children. The 1960s also saw advocacy for agricultural laborers by Cesar Chavez through the United Farm Workers. Chavez achieved some success by adopting the tactics of the African American civil rights movement, marches, and boycotts. Public debate today centers primarily on immigration reform. A major problem that Hispanics have encountered in grasping and wielding political power is their considerable intra-group diversity. In other words, with 61 million Hispanic Americans, they don't all agree on what the answers are to political issues. A record 32 million Latinos are projected to be eligible to vote in 2020. Traditionally, voter turnout has been lower than average for Hispanics due to poverty and class issues. Asian Americans are a diverse minority, growing rapidly via international migration. The lack of immigration from Asia during much of the first half of the 20th century can be attributed most directly to legislation passed by Congress that restricted immigration from China and Japan. The Naturalization Act of 1790 limited naturalization to free white persons of good character. Asian immigration was specifically forbidden until 1952. During World War II, Japanese Americans were placed in detainment camps for national security purposes. When forced out of wage labor during World War II, many became entrepreneurs. Asian Americans today often achieve academic success and economic prosperity. Compared to other minorities, Asian Americans have lower levels of voter turnout and registration, but it is beginning to increase. As a group, they also have low party identification. Nearly half of Asian Americans consider themselves political independents. Asian Americans are the fastest growing segment of eligible voters. More than half of Asian American eligible voters are concentrated in just 3 states: California, New York, and Texas. Let's review. Congressional policy toward Native Americans has historically varied between assimilating Native Americans into a European-based culture and encouraging independence and self-government. A major problem that Hispanics have encountered in grasping and wielding political power is their considerable intra-group diversity. Compared to other minorities, Asian Americans have lower levels of voter turnout and registration, but it is beginning to increase.